Whether you have been thinking about selling vintage on Etsy or you're selling on eBay and other platforms and your profits just aren't adding up, today I'm going to share with you why selling on Etsy may be a great start or a great addition to what you're already doing. Hello, my name is Margaret. I have been selling on Etsy for over 12 years. It's actually the platform I started on before eBay, and it's what really got me into loving reselling. Today, I'm breaking down everything you need to know about selling on Etsy, the pros, the cons, the fees. Whether you're thinking about starting or you're already selling, this video will help you decide if Etsy is right for you. Here's what you can expect in this video. I'm going to share with you what you can sell on Etsy, the pros of selling vintage and the cons of selling vintage, an eBay and Etsy price and fees comparison, and how to get started on Etsy super easy, whether you're just starting out or you're already listing on other platforms. Some extra bonus reseller tips and some frequently asked questions. Let's start with the basic question of what can you sell on Etsy? There are still people today that believe that all you can sell on Etsy is handmade goods, and that's just simply not true. On Etsy, you can sell handmade goods, supplies to make handmade goods, digital downloads, print-on-demand items, and vintage items. Today, I'm focusing mostly on vintage items, but there will, of course, be other tips sprinkled in. Etsy defines vintage as anything that's 20 years old or older. So because this is 2025, anything from 2005 or before is considered vintage. Popular vintage categories that sell well are vintage clothing, jewelry, of course, accessories, home decor, collectibles, memorabilia, vintage toys. I could go on and on. And when you're listing an item and you're not exactly sure if it's something, say, made in the 50s or the 60s, if you're worried that you don't know how to date something accurately, it's okay. Because in the listing process, there is a way to list something as 20 years old or older without having to specify the exact decade that it's from. Let's dive into the pros of selling on Etsy. Etsy has a built-in audience, a lot like eBay and Amazon. When people think vintage or something unique, they think Etsy. A lot of nostalgic shoppers go to Etsy to look for unique and collectible items. The clean layout and searchability of Etsy really draws in these buyers that are looking for unique and vintage items. On Etsy, you'll also find that you can get a higher average sold price for items than you can on eBay and other platforms. I'm going to go back into that a little bit in a moment where we talk about the difference between eBay and Etsy price comparisons and fees. But having sold on Etsy and eBay for many, many years, I can absolutely get a higher price for an item on Etsy based on that perceived value and the way that the site is laid out. I really think that being able to get a higher price on Etsy has a lot to do with the user experience. The pages are just so clean and it feels like a higher end site than eBay. And people go to Etsy expecting to find quality goods. There's definitely something to be said for perceived value. Another pro of selling on Etsy is that your listings last for 4 months. So you get a much longer longevity for your listing in the search. On Etsy, there's also integrated shipping where you can ship through Etsy, similar to the way it works on eBay. And you can also have custom shop branding on Etsy as well. Another pro of starting on Etsy is that there's a very low startup cost. You can start with items from around your home. You could start from garage sales or thrift stores. Another pro of selling on Etsy is how cheap it is to start listing on Etsy. It's 20 cents per listing, and that lasts for 4 months. I have a link down below where you can get 40 free listings when you start on Etsy. Another pro of selling on Etsy is that you can have multiple shops at the same time, as long as you state in your About section what your different shops are. For example, I have multiple shops. I have a print-on-demand shop, a digital download shop. I sell vintage items on Etsy, and if I wanted to, I could create a whole nother shop just for vintage jewelry. So being able to have multiple shops where you're scaling down the different things that you're selling is really a pro in my books. That way I'm not having to mix my vintage items with my print-on-demand items. And if you're already reselling, you know the pros of the environmental impacts We are keeping things from going to landfills when we're selling online. We're buying things from garage sales and thrift stores that might have otherwise ended up in the dump. And there is definitely a sustainable shopping trend that has been going on for years. People that really want to buy things used versus continuing that fast fashion or those quick things that you can buy from mass manufacturers. A lot of the cons that I hear people talk about with selling on Etsy could easily be said for many of the other platforms that we sell on. I hear a lot of it's really oversaturated. I don't have enough space to store all of this stuff. On Etsy, you have to write a more detailed listing, which isn't really true. And those Etsy fees add up, which I will be getting into when we compare those eBay and Etsy fees. Something that's a little bit different on Etsy is that if you're selling $10,000 a year or more, they have mandatory off-site ads that you have to opt into. But if you're not selling more than $10,000 a year on Etsy, then you can opt out of the mandatory off-site ads. Let's talk about the comparison between eBay and Etsy fees and price comparisons. What can you expect to make from the same item on eBay or Etsy? We're going to take this item that I actually sold recently. This is a Westmoreland milk glass dish container with a lid, and I sold it on Etsy for $40. I bought this at an estate sale for $2. Let's compare with an Etsy sales calculator and an eBay fees calculator to see what kind of fees we can expect and what kind of profit this would bring had I sold it on eBay versus Etsy. Etsy's fees break down this way. There's a 20-cent listing fee, which lasts for 4 months. There's a transaction fee once the item sells, which is 6.5%. There's a payment processing fee, which is 3% plus 25 cents. And then any advertising fees or offsite ads that are run is separate. I'm using this Etsy fee calculator, but you can use any that you like when you type in Etsy fee calculator. So I'll type in the Etsy item sold price, which was $40. The item cost was $2. The shipping that I charged was $6, and my shipping cost was also right around $6. I think it was $5.75, but we'll just keep it the same for now. Seller location, that's right. Is the currency different? This is if it was an international sale, which it was not. I wasn't using offsite ads, sales tax, all these other costs. So the total profit for this item for me was $33.18. Now let's take a look using the eBay fee calculator. The sold price, if it had sold on eBay, would have been $40. We're just going to keep the shipping the same, $6. Item cost was $2. Shipping cost, $6, just keeping it the same. Number of orders, 1. Now this is where it gets a little trickier on eBay. You have different fees for different categories. If you have a store or you don't have a store. So I do have a store. I have a premium store, I think. Basic or premium. I am an above standard seller. I might be top rated, but I'll just keep it at above standard. So that will change your fee structure as well. Overseas sale, I wasn't doing promoted listings, no donation to charity. We'll leave sales tax off. And so eBay fees, $6.24. The total profit, if I had sold this on eBay, would have been $31.76 versus the $33.18 on Etsy. And initially you might think, well, that's not that big of a difference, but over time, those dollars add up. And for higher ticket items, it definitely adds up. Let's take a look also at the kind of price points that you can expect on Etsy. You can ask a higher price for an item on Etsy than you can for eBay. I wanted to show you a side-by-side comparison of the same item that sold multiple times on eBay versus multiple times on Etsy and the price that these sellers got for the same item. On Etsy, this is a Yadro clown. It's a bust, and this sold for $280. Here is another bust of the same clown sold for $289. So both of those, $280 plus dollars. The same item on eBay. This sold for $66 on auction. This sold for $112. and this item sold for $130. So you're looking at well over $100, $150 more and $200 more in some cases for the same exact item. In the description box, there's a link that will take you to Etsy and give you 40 free listings to get your shop started. And the way that I do this, where I sell on eBay and Etsy, I use my same photos, my same listing, my same titles, everything. And I use List Perfectly. And this is a site where I can just list all of my items on multiple platforms. I used to sell on eBay, Etsy, Mercari, Poshmark, Facebook Marketplace, multiple places. I've scaled back a little bit because it's just a lot for one person to do, but I definitely keep my eBay and my Etsy because those are the two platforms that make me the most money. And if you're already selling on another platform and you're like, man, I don't want to have to redo all my listings for Etsy, that's a lot of work. If you use List Perfectly, I have a 30% off coupon in my description box. You can automatically go to eBay or wherever you already have your listings. Once you have List Perfectly installed, and you can select your listings and it will automatically populate them into Etsy for you. It's not a very labor intensive process. You won't have to do it one at a time by hand like we had to do in the old days. You could just select them all and have them import them over to Etsy. A lot of the tips that I would give you for Etsy are tips that I would give you for selling on any of the other platforms that you sell on. You want to have really good pictures. You want to make sure that your title and your description is optimized for search engines. You want to use words that people are actually searching for to find your item. On Etsy, there is a place for tags, which if you're using List Perfectly, there is a listing assistant that when you drop your pictures in and click listing assistant, it will populate all of those tags for you. So you don't have to think about what kinds of words would I use to describe this item. It does it for you. And as far as frequently asked questions, which is, does an item have to be handmade to sell on Etsy? And the answer to that is no. You can sell vintage, handmade, supplies, print on demand, digital downloads. There's a lot of different things that you can sell on Etsy. Another question I get a lot is, should I put everything in one store? And that is completely up to you. You can have handmade items, vintage items, print on demand items, all in one store if that's your choice. But you also have the flexibility to have multiple stores with your brand on each. Another question I get is, can you have the same item listed on eBay, Etsy, and all these other platforms? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. You can have the same item listed in multiple places. And the follow-up question for that is, what happens if the same item sells on both places at the same time? I have been selling for 12 years or more on these platforms, and I could say that that's happened maybe 5 times ever. And normally what I do is I would probably just cancel the sale that came in second and honor the first sale. And again, it has only happened, I would say, 5 times ever. It's just not something worth worrying too much about. And with List Perfectly, they have an automatic delist. So if an item sells on one platform, it will delist it from the other platforms. Another question I get frequently is, can I have the same item for different prices on different sites? And the answer to that is yes. I often am running a sale on eBay and not on Etsy. And so my prices will be different on these sites. And if you wanted to, you could raise your price on Etsy because you know you could get a higher price there. Whether you feel like that is a moral thing to do is completely up to you. There are big retailers that have different prices on items, whether you're shopping online or you're shopping in store. It is just the way business is run. And if I had a person who saw my item on eBay for $40 and saw it on Etsy for $60 and said, hey, isn't that the same item that you're selling for $40? Of course, I would honor the $40 sale. But I've also had people say, you've got an item listed for $40. Another seller has the same item listed for $20. I don't honor that $20 sale. My price is my price. So is selling vintage on Etsy worth it? For me, it is an absolute yes. It definitely takes patience getting set up, but it is completely worth it. I will say in Q4, which is the last 3 months of the year, October, November, December, my Etsy sales always overshadow my eBay sales because people are going to Etsy looking for a more unique item to give as a gift. If you are willing to put in the work, cross post those items, it can be rewarding and profitable. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos helping you learn to be a better reseller. And leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear, are you already selling vintage? Are you considering starting on Etsy? What's been your experience so far? Until next time, happy hunting.